Hi there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. This is our monthly show where we talk to creative people who have never met each other and have them give us a discussion about what makes them creative, what fires their instincts up, and how did they get into the position they're in. This month, we're talking gardening. And if you're not in South Florida, you're like, Bob, what in the heck are you doing? I don't can't do gardening in January. And that is what we want to do. We want to get you fired up for those kinds of ideas. I've got Noah Siegel and Clayton Birch with me today. Noah, get us started. Tell us about give me the nutshell of who you are and what is gardening all about for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Noah Siegel. I am a farmer at the Fruitful Field Garden in Deerfield Beach. I use what's called regenerative organic agricultural methods in farming. So it's a way to regenerate soil and create an abundance of food. I've been farming since I was 18 years old, um, and I love it. I love growing food and I love feeding people.
Clayton, you follow up on that, and then I've already got a question for you guys. Tell us, Clayton.
My name is Clayton Birch. I live in Davie. I've been gardening for a long time, ever since I was about 14 years old, probably back in 1987. I started Showcase Gardens in 1996 after working for several people in the industry. I went to University of Florida to get my degree in landscape horticulture and environmental science. And today I'm just basically going over everything, I guess, in my career. As far as designing, we design pools, we design landscapes, we do everything as far as maintenance is concerned. We do some pest management, and we also do some, I guess, basic troubleshooting. If you have any problems on the job, I can kind of come and figure out exactly what needs to be done, or if you have something that has kind of any weird thing that nobody can figure
Yeah.
out, just call me up and I can usually figure it out for you.
That is an awesome, awesome idea. So now I want to get right into because you both already mentioned gardening and farming and landscaping. So Noah, give me your description of what is the difference between a garden and a farm. And then Clayton, I want you to follow up with how that changes to landscaping and how all three of those things tie together for people.
Um, Personally, I think I have an interesting perspective on the differences. To me, farming and gardening and landscaping are kind of all one and the same. We're all kind of witnessing the growth of plants and facilitating growth in a different way. In gardening, usually it's on a smaller scale, so at a home or a community garden. And farming is usually on a larger scale, so high production yields of food. But both of them are using similar methods, and I'm sure landscaping has, we're growing plants, so has similar methods as well.
So now, Clayton, how does that fit into your idea there? When you're talking about doing landscaping, how do you incorporate like gardening versus landscaping?
Well, I'll agree with gardening with Noah. It is more of on a smaller scale than farming. Landscaping is a little bit different. There's all different types of conditions that we have to deal with in the urban landscape. As far as builders and how they develop homes, there's usually different conditions for every house, and we have to know our species to make sure that we adopt the right ones for your conditions.
Now, and Noah, I know you have some community gardens out there as well as part of the Fruitful Farm area. So, how do those people work out there for those kind of garden things? Are they using the same materials that you're using out there, or what are they doing with that?
So our community plot section is a little bit different. They're raised bed gardens, so they're raised off the ground, and so it's a little bit more controlled. And they're 10 by 10 foot gardens, and they're allowed to grow whatever they like. Trees, we limit it. We can't grow trees in your plot. Vegetables and smaller fruit trees, you can grow pineapples and things like that. And then on the other side of the farm is like a food forest. So we have kind of edible landscaping with fruit trees, and then traditional like agricultural row crops. So we're growing right in the ground. So the community plot members use raised beds, and the rest of the farm uses traditional row cropping and fruit trees.
That's cool. So Clayton, could that edible landscaping there sounds like right up your alley too? Can you do that just like in any? Admittedly, for everybody out there listening, this is South Florida, so yeah, we can just put a lemon tree or a lime tree in the backyard, or mangoes or whatever we want. But I'm certain there's ideas like that for just about everywhere in the country, right?
Absolutely. You can grow different kinds of things. If you want to consume something, we'll pick the right species for you. And depending on where you live and what type of crops you want to grow, depends on what type of or what time of year that you want to have your crops grown. But as far as what Noah's doing, he's a little bit more adept at getting everything ready for you as far as consuming foods.
Well,
Primarily, my landscaping is not really about anything edible. It is more just enhancing what you have as far as your property.
yeah. One of the things I found out about you, Clayton, is like you're a very anti-grass person, aren't you?
Well, grass is one of those things that it consumes an excessive amount of water. And when you have homes that do not have wells and they have water that's being bought essentially from the city, the water bill can get quite high if you've got a lot of grass. So we try to do a lot of xeriscaping and a lot of different plants that allow you to not consume so much water throughout the year.
Explain that term xeriscaping for people out there who may not have heard about that.
Xeriscape is a concept of using plants that do not require large amounts of water for your landscaping. And there's also uses of mulches and soil amendments that go along with that to help reduce your water consumption.
Okay. Okay. So now let's dig back a little bit because both of you said teenagers or earlier when you started on these careers here. Hey, Clayton, you go first and then Noah follow up on them. Compare your two paths as you were getting started. Was it both down here in South Florida? Starting off that young just makes me feel like your dad kicked you out in the back and said, here, go mow the lawn and go take care of it or something like that. Fill me in. What happened there?
Well, young men, they like to get dirty. And so it starts with the dirt. Once you get a little bit dirty and get some dirt under your fingernails, you start looking around and realize what you're digging around. And there's some beautiful trees, and you start really getting interested in certain species, right away. And, you'll lock onto one species and it'll be your favorite for a while. And then you get onto another one and it just kind of rolls on from there. No one really ever said anything that you should do this or do that. We just kind of went into it and just fell in love with the plants.
How about you, Noah?
Similar experience. I went on a trip to Thailand when I was 18. And while I was there, our mission was to, there was a schoolhouse that was high in the villages of Chiang Mai Mountains. And the school children had to travel during the weekends to the schoolhouse, and then for the 5 days of school, they had to live on the property of the schoolhouse, and then on the weekends they would travel back home. And during that time, high in the mountains, they didn't have access to a lot of fresh produce and fruit and vegetables. So it was our mission to create what's called a permaculture plot, which is a big word for basically a sustainable food system. And we made this permaculture plot for them. And I saw the impact of growing, what it could have on a community. And from then on, it kind of it's something I had to do. Feeding people was like innate to me at that point.
Clayton, you tell me, where did you get your? You kind of got into the whole building plants thing, but then where'd you get into the whole landscaping? Where did you start feeling? Did you go to take some classes, or did you just build it on your own, or what?
Well, I was an artist, and I was going to go to art school for a while, and when you do landscaping, it's like the ultimate art, because
Yeah.
you are working in 3D, and everything is constantly changing and growing. And so when you're designing a landscape or designing a garden, you really have to more or less look into the future of how it's going to look in the coming months or the coming years, rather than how it looks now. I see a lot of gardens that are put in, and it can look pretty right away, but if it's not going to be functional, that's where the real art of landscaping and gardening comes in. If you can make it functional and make it look good in the future, that's the real key.
Yeah. And so tell us about how you both started, because you've got a good start on, why you've done it, but tell us about that, why how you feel expressive in this particular thing. Like a painter, as you said, you're doing this art, and you've got something to show. Landscaping, gardening, it's very vibrant right at the moment, but then it goes away and you got to rebuild or redo. Fill us in on how do you get a chance to be expressive, and how could somebody who's out there who's like, well, wait a minute, if I can be a landscaper, how would they get started with all this kind of stuff, or getting out there and building a farm or a garden? What do you think?
Well, if you want to build a garden, you know it's easy to build a garden, but if you want to do some landscaping, I would suggest working for someone who does some landscaping, and that's exactly what I did. When I was young, some of my first jobs were working for landscapers, and then I realized that I was semi decent at it, and that you can make some money. And until you learn a little tips of, most of the time when you go to a garden center, a lot of it is what I call buy and die. And it is set up for you to buy some plants, for you to bring them home, for them to not do so well, and then for you to purchase some more. And so when you start to learn the species and learn which ones that are the ones that work, then those are the ones you take to the design, and that's the ones you put into the client's home. And that's the ones that usually work out, and you can make a good career by doing that little method.
How about it? No, how do you build up a career in this?
Well, it's the same exact way in landscaping, actually, with farming and gardening. Um, I'm not gonna grow like iceberg lettuce in South Florida. That doesn't make any sense. It won't grow well. So and when you go to like Home Depot, for example, and you not a lot of those seedlings that you buy, the vegetable seedlings aren't suited for our climate. So there's a lot of people that buy a seedling and put it in their home garden, and they get upset and discouraged and say, I don't have a green thumb. And I never really believe in that notion. It's all about variety. So I grow a lot of Asian greens and Asian crops, because we have similar climates to like South Asia. We're a high humid environment. And so yeah, how I got into it was I just was really passionate. I was like, I want to start doing this myself. So I had a home garden, and I just experimented. I was like, oh, this crop didn't work. I'm learning. I'm going to try this crop. And then I slowly started to figure things out. And at the Fruitful Field uh, was another, step up the ladder and learning, because it just opened my eyes up to, oh, this is like full production, and we're growing lots of different varieties, things I've never heard of, fruit trees I've never heard of, fruit I've never heard of, vegetables I've never heard of, things you can't buy at the store. And that got me deeper and deeper down the hole, and got me passionate about exposing that to people. At the Fruitful Field, we grow probably 99% of the things we grow you cannot buy at the grocery store. And I hand
Oh,
like a this to somebody, and they're like, what is this? And it kind of gets them curious, like, well, this is called Tokyo Bacana, for example. You can't buy it at the store. It doesn't look like anything you could buy at the store,
never
but
heard
cook,
of.
yeah, cook it
What
like
is
you
that?
would. It's a cross between a lettuce and a cabbage. It was actually the first plant grown in space, Tokyo Bacana, and it grows like a weed in Florida. It's a great edible crop, super fast, but we've never heard of it. So I gave it to these people and like, cook it like you would spinach, and they cook it like, wow, this is amazing. It's like, yeah, it's amazing. So you can grow this at your home and try it yourself.
That is a really cool idea. That's really fun. And so when you guys are both talking about climate zone, you casually mentioned like climate zone or what goes down here in South Florida. I wanted to get two inputs on that. One, my first thought is always urban versus suburban versus rural zones. Like, what can you do in any of these particular areas? And then down here, I think we're zone 10, is if I understand from looking over my wife's shoulder as she does things. South Florida is zone 10. So what are some of these zones that people out there around the rest of the country, when they listen to this, are going to be finding? And what's those differences that you guys found in your own thing? You mentioned earlier about certain things won't grow down here.
Well, as far as landscaping, my specialty is in zones 9 and 10. But I will give you a nice example. Whenever I see a new mall or a new shopping center, I love to go look at the brand new landscaping because I can really see how they designed it and who designed it and actually where they're from by the design. Because there's a lot of plants that are in there that are, northern Florida plants, southern Georgia type plants, and they're planted down here in South Florida and they look good in the meantime on the primary planting, but as time goes on, they'll start to deteriorate because it's a little too hot or the climate isn't just well suited for them, or they need a little bit of cool weather to keep going for the rest of their lifetime. So right now, when you see a new shopping center, when I go look at it, I can tell if the landscape architect or the designer was from Jacksonville, Georgia, Orlando, or Miami. Usually,
that's expert level there.
If you see something from Miami or a Miami designer, they have a lot of tropical stuff and they know the palette that's down here and they know it very well, and they'll design with that. But most of the time when you have a big property and it's being developed, most of the landscape architects, the design goes out for a bid, and whoever gets that bid is the one who designs it. And so usually if it's someone from up north, you can tell by the choice of plants that they use for their design.
Tell me about that, Noah, and fill us in a little bit more. Clayton here's got an eye to be. How wide are these bands of zones 9, 10, central and northern Florida, different to South Florida down here where we are? How wide are these bands, and how you guys are both experts now at knowing this, but for the average person, do they really need to pay that much attention?
So basically, the zones work by if you look up grow zones in my area, it can change from city to city, it can change from county to county, depending on where you are in the world. For us, for growers, it matters a lot because and especially in South Florida, we don't have a frost. So if I was in Texas, for example, like Central Texas, there's a frost that happens. So I'm not going to be able to grow certain crops while it's snowing or when it's below freezing. But in Florida and South Florida, I mean, even in Northern Florida, there can be frost and it can get below 32 degrees. So even in the state of Florida, there's a big differential between grow zones and where you are. So really, that's where you are, where you're located. Yeah, there's an example. So.
Yeah, the reason I asked, as you guys were talking about this, I was bringing this up, and I'm like, this thing has a lot more than just 1 through 10. This thing's really finely gradiated. And Clayton's just like, oh yeah, I know that particular thing from looking at plants where a person came from. You guys are definitely way experts over what I can do.
Now there are a bit of microclimate, is what we call them, in different areas, where, like where I am in Broward County, just with the last bit of cold snap that we had, everything near the coast was fine. We had no damage whatsoever. Some of more inland areas, the western suburbs, we had a bit of frost, and it's kind of a spotty thing. It's not on every species in that neighborhood. In particular, if you took the same species and throughout that neighborhood, they're not all going to be damaged. Okay. Some houses are going to have more damage. Some houses are going to have less damage. even with the same species in the same neighborhood.
And going back to the earlier part about urban versus suburban, because I mean, at least down here in South Florida, I don't think we really have rural areas down here in South Florida like we do in Central or Northern Florida, at least. But does that matter? If you're going to be out there gardening, does it matter whether you're in a densely urban area as long as you've got, Noah, you had mentioned raised plot or raised bed gardening. Does that, I'm just guessing that that's just keeping it as a tighter container type area.
Yeah, raised beds are more structured and confined to a particular spot rather than just letting things go free. And most communities allow you to have a raised bed in your backyard, and have fruit trees in Florida. It's pretty common.
People don't let you have. I just can't imagine that now. That did not occur to me. Like I could not have something like a tree in my back. I've got like 8 trees in my yard in Coral Springs. I can't imagine not having trees.
Yeah. So, some cities and HOAs or whatever allow it, and then some don't. So you just got to work within where you're living. But yeah, raised beds are more controlled, and it's more controlled in the fact that you're adding the soil that you can purchase or create. So you're creating the best soil that you can, rather than me when I'm farming in the ground in the Florida sandy soil. I've had to amend it with compost and chicken
Tell people what
manure.
amend means.
Amend means to try and make better.
Okay.
So we have very sandy soil in South Florida that doesn't host a lot of fungi and hosts a lot of bacteria, and then also doesn't allow for nutrients to be held for a long period of time because it's sandy, and rain and water will just kind of wash it through. So what my goal is we have sandy soil. I'm trying to create sandy loam soil. So loam is where you add organic matter to soil, and if you like go into a forest and you grow under a tree and you grab like a handful of this like dark black stuff, that's all loamy soil. That's what we want. So my mission when I'm growing in Florida soil is to make more loamy soil, add compost, add chicken manure, add cow manure, things like that to make more loamy soil that's suitable for crops to grow.
Okay. And Clayton, I'm guessing that's very similar to what you're doing when you're out there with landscaping beds and such.
Absolutely. If you don't amend the soil, your species is pretty much cut in half. If
Okay.
you, like Bob, you mentioned that you live in Coral Springs. Now, normally, if we go into a landscape and we use the particular soil that's there's quite a few species that will grow great. And other than that, when you introduce some new species, we have a lot of soil organisms that are not really good for most of the landscaping plants. And then also developed land, which is in the suburbs, is usually lakes that are blasted out and dug out, and then they have limestone put under the houses. And so usually when you go dig, it's all rock. So
Yeah.
when we have
Definitely that in my backyard. Yeah.
I can only imagine. I've been in plenty of landscapes in Coral Springs. You do have to amend the soil. What we do recommend is when we put something in, we add soil on top of the existing soil. And then as we put the trees and the plants in, what we're doing is we are incorporating an organic material soil in with the soil that you have in the neighborhood. And it makes a nice mix, and it allows the nutrients to stick around for a little bit longer, and the plants do a lot better.
Gotcha. And so here's we're at the part of the show where I always ask this question about what, and this might be interesting for you two here. What do you think is the biggest failure that you've done? Because you guys get really good successes, and for you to see success, I mean, you've got it right there growing in front of you, and it's easy to see. When you're talking about your projects, about what you're working on, what's that failure that you're like, man, I wish I would have done that different?
For me, it would be about the client, because we
Tell me.
we wouldn't be able to do any of these landscapes and make any money and do these wonderful projects if it wasn't for the client wanting to do something like this.
Okay.
And so there's a bit of having to do what the client wants, and you're also relying on your expertise to guide the client into what is going to be best for them. So those two can come together and make something great. And you always have the one client that can be difficult, that wants A, B, and C that you just know won't work, but you're going to have to take care of the client and give them what they want. And so that's what we do. And we try to steer them a certain way to make sure that we're successful in the end and that we get many customers beyond this
Yeah.
particular project. And so we're just going to try to keep on going. So it's basically you try to educate the customer on the different things, and that's about it. And hopefully it all works out in the end.
Tell us, Noah. What do you think? What's the biggest failure that you've had to overcome?
So I'm constantly learning as I progress in growing food. Initially, when I first started out, we were designing a certain portion of a garden, and it's common to use kind of a weed barrier that goes underneath where you're putting the soil on, and that's a pretty common practice still. But in terms of how I garden and how I grow, that's just created more and more problems down the line, and I eventually had to just rip up, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet of landscape fabric that was underneath the ground because I was restricting root growth in the ground. So that's something I learned. It was a great, valuable lesson for me. But it was a failure. But I learned a lot about to do that.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly how. Yeah, you never know until you hit that button, and then it's like, can you go backwards to go make those corrections or figure out? So tell me, where did you? I mean, when you were getting started, who was the big influence for you, and what did they do to help you get where you are? Because neither of you went to school for this. I know there are courses out there that you can take. There's lots of gardening and stuff at the community colleges and high school and after, those sorts of things that you can take. The library offers a lot of those courses too online. But what did you guys get out of those mentors that you started with, and who were those people that really got you going?
For me, it was David McLean, the late David McLean. He knew just about every species of plant that was down here. He was a real good troubleshooter. He was a guy that he learned everything the hard way, and he knew everything about plants and about species and about problems on properties and different landscapes, that people just couldn't solve. And I remember taking a xeriscape course with him when I was really young, and I was fortunate enough to take some classes at Broward College with him as well. And his ID courses were phenomenal. And he had these cue cards or these index cards that had every condition and everything that you could use each one of these species for. A vine, a bush, privacy, a hedge. He had everything listed so that you could take each one of these species and adapt it to each one of these conditions. And it's the way I've really conducted the way I learn about plants, going forward into the future. He just had it already mapped out for me, and I'm just still doing that today.
How about you, Noah?
So, a man named Tyler Whiffley, he introduced me to permaculture while I was in Thailand, and he kind of just exploded my mind with how we can utilize fruits and vegetables in a certain way to be super sustainable. For example, we were designing this garden on a slope, and he was like, we're going to use these banana trees to control the flow of the water, because bananas, they grow from a corm, this big thing under the ground, and they can absorb a lot of water. So it's like to prevent flooding and water from going where we don't, we're going to use these banana trees in a way instead of digging these troughs, we used banana pups. So he had methods like that, just method after method after method about sustainability and growing that kind of just like it just felt right with me. It was just like so innate to my being. It was like, this is what I need to do. And actually, I am educated in this. I have a master's of science in regenerative
Oh, okay.
organic agriculture.
That is awesome. No, so and that leads me to my next thing. Then that's really awesome. I did not know that. Thank you, Noah. For going to school on this. I mean, obviously, to do a small local backyard garden, you don't need to go to school for. But tell us about that whole process of going through schooling and those sorts of things. What's the difference in between that as a backyard gardener slash community farmer versus going the full degree route? You've got a master's,
My
you said?
my degree course is geared towards regenerative agriculture, which is basically taking land that's been conventionally grown and kind of abused and turning it back into like a thriving soil setting. So it's a lot of education and a lot of knowledge on soil science and understanding how the soil works and how to benefit it. And then regenerative is like, how do you regenerate this degraded soil? Well, you use cover cropping and composting and nitrogen fixing plants and things like that, which are all great things for everyone to know and understand. But my degree kind of just focused in on it went deeper and deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of
Gotcha.
soil and carbon sequestration and cation exchange and all these terms that mean something,
Yeah.
but not necessary at all. It's nature teaches
Oh,
us.
I think they're pretty necessary. I think you're one of the people who's going to help us survive this as South Florida starts, adding water and doing that kind of stuff. That's what I actually want to go with, especially on the landscaping side of things, Clayton. I mean, I know crops are really sensitive to water. And Clayton, you were talking about planting for the correct soils. How are we adjusting? I mean, everybody knows South Florida is right in the middle of climate change. How are we adjusting? What are people going to have to be changing and doing for this as you're building a landscape that's supposed to last for decades?
Well, Noah's really bringing me back with the cation exchange. I haven't heard some of these terms in a long time. From University of Florida, it was a lot of fun. Um, but as far as climate change is going on right now, I would say it's more. I'm having issues that I see with heat related issues on plants rather than flooding issues. I haven't really come across anything where we're having problems with water inundation. A
Okay.
lot of the plants that we've had flooding events, hurricanes, storms, these different scenarios, the plants seem to recover quite well. They can get flooded. A few of the ground covers, things that have a little bit more, um, smaller stature, where they're completely covered over by the water, where the leaves are completely covered. That can be a problem. Usually, if a flooded root system is, it's not, they bounce back from that. The only issues that I see right now would be heat related issues. So we're having certain species where I don't think I've had these problems before, but I'm starting to see some heat related issues such as the sun scald or different areas of plants where we're having issues of high drought, even though that the plant has, or it seems to be high drought from what I can tell looking at the leaves. However, the soil is moist, so it's more of a heat related issues that I'm coming across.
And no, I know from being here in South Florida, I know Deerfield Beach up near your area, I know their wells are dealing with saltwater intrusion, right? Up there. How does that affect where you're farming? I'm guessing that changes the crops you have to plant, or can you plant crops with the salt type stuff?
My goal in farming in the way that I do is to have to water less and less and less over time. So naturally, soil that's good, you won't really need to worry about watering. It'll hold water well, and then with the amount of rain we get in Florida and South Florida specifically, watering shouldn't be something that we have to worry about because we can collect rain. and use rainwater to water. So, saltwater intrusion is, a potential problem in the future. So, but we have access to water in many different forms. Rain is a perfect form. Rain collection is super easy, and it's some of the best water that you can ever use. It's hard to get better than rainwater, and the plants love it. You can just kind of tell after a nice rain, all the crops are looking at you so happy rather than right before. There's just something about it, and so looking at methods like rain collection and making the soil better, having perennial strips of like fruit trees within your growing to create some protection, some shade protection, some barriers. There's lots
You're
of
going to make
ways.
a lot of people up north jealous on this one. Yeah, we just casually plant oranges and lemons and limes. Yeah.
Yeah, grow in South Florida.
So I want to hear from you guys. What do you think the rest of society thinks about what you're doing and how about the profession and the whole concept of just gardening? Because as I almost just like casually just was like, oh, well, nobody gets a degree in this. And then bam, you guys are both like, oh, no, we took these college courses and we did this, that, the other. So Phil, straighten me out here. Tell me, what do you think, in your opinion, other people are thinking versus what you living in the industry and the idea believe?
I can take an example just from my family. I have two nieces. One of them doesn't care about plants. One of them loves plants, and it all starts with, you have a little plant, and if you've ever made a cutting from any small plant or herbaceous material where you stick something in water and it grows roots, and they see that it grows and that you can actually make more plants, and then they start replicating this small little experiment, you'll get the bug. And once you get the bug, you just kind of really spiral into the green world of growing plants, and you just can't stop.
How about it, Noah? What do you think people think about when they come out? Do they think you guys is just happy farmer? I'm trying to picture how, because I lived up in the Midwest growing up, and we had farms, and I knew farmers who would just go out there every day and do their stuff. And yeah, you're making me rethink my own words from just 10 minutes ago. Now I'm like, man, yeah, hey, people are really out there doing science on this.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. Unfortunately, farming right now, less than 2% of our world's population grows all of our food. So that number is a pretty harsh number. Usually we start getting afraid when the number drops below 49% of our population, but we're below 2%. So there's not a lot of farmers. There's not a lot of young farmers either. Most of them are older and are about to retire. So we need young farmers that care about creating good food for people and sustainable system. And I think the misconceptions that I always find people assert is about them having a green thumb or not having a green thumb. And that's something that I'm very passionate about, and I want to demystify. Growing food is like innate to us. We've been growing food since we've been people on this earth, and we've been cultivating and harvesting vegetables for a very, very long time. So there's not a green thumb or not or a black thumb. Everyone has the equal opportunity to be able to grow plants and to be able to feed themselves. There's just knowledge that we've kind of pushed away from. Very few people in the world know how to grow their own food. It's not something that is impossible. It's just a skill that's learned. It's a knowledge thing. And once you have the knowledge, then you're set and you understand it.
Not a bad idea. I like that. I like the idea that everybody has an opportunity to. Yeah. I think that, Clayton, you mentioned earlier you were talking about cards and like index cards and doing it, and I was just like, I'm betting there's an app out there where I can just take a picture or scan something and it'll fill me in on those things nowadays.
I've looked at a lot of apps, and I've tried to analyze them, but none of them have really ever gotten it right.
Okay.
Like I said, each community has got a slight microclimate of what you're going to be successful with. Noah is probably a little bit more. He's got a little bit more amended soil with some raised beds, but from what I normally do, the soil and conditions can vary greatly from neighborhood to neighborhood. So one person can have a successful crop with one particular species. The next neighborhood over, the guy could be doing the same thing, and it just doesn't work out right. It's what you have to do is you have to just be able to adapt, just like plants adapt, and figure out what is the better condition that is going to make that plant successful, and that's the challenge of it, and that's why we're in the game, because we love the challenge of it. And some people just give up after something doesn't work out. Go buy a different species, try that one out, and you'll probably be successful. So just like Noah said, the green thumb concept is, it's kind of, it's a myth. It's, if you have success with certain plants right off the bat, hey, you'll probably get into it a little bit quicker than the guy who didn't have success in the beginning.
And I want to follow up with that because this is the question we ask everybody, because we do a lot of gadgets, we do a lot of tech stuff, obviously, here with Creation Station. What's the piece of equipment you really wish you had that you don't? I mean, and I want you to tell us about your everyday equipment that you use, because especially as it compares to like regular gardening or a home person doing landscaping versus you as a professionals doing this kind of stuff. Is that type of gear really different?
Well, there is one gadget that I learned a long time ago, and it's not something that I use every day, but it's an infrared heat gun. And
Like my cooking.
Someone taught me this a long time ago, and it's a laser, and you can point it at something, and it'll show the temperature. And
I've got that for my pizza oven. You're saying I should be using that in my garden?
I've learned this from this guy Joel. We were planting, I don't know, I think we planted about 40 or so oak trees, and to figure out which one is lowest on the water or which one needs water, he would just drive on the golf cart and point that laser to each tree, and each one of them had a very consistent temperature. There was a couple that were all off, and those were the ones that were going to fail because they weren't getting enough water.
Huh.
So it was that just blew my mind.
Yeah.
So that was,
I would have never dreamed
that I adopted.
Infrared thermometer was coming up in a gardening show. Never. Tell me, Noah, what's going on there? What kind of gear are you guys using?
We use mostly hand tools and wheelbarrows and rakes and shovels. I really like to use primitive style tools. It connects you more with the earth, and you're more accurate, and you can see things, and you're more observant. A wish list thing that I've always wanted is, there's this tool for harvesting salad mix. So salad mix, how it grows, you grow in these wide bands on the ground, across the ground, and when you harvest it, you have to meticulously get on your hands and knees and carve with the knife about an inch above the plant all the way down, and it takes a really long time. It's really, really tedious to get this nice salad mix. But there's this machine that you can buy that you can just drive over the row, and it chops it, and then there's like a conveyor belt that brings it into a basket, so you can just like push it over the salad mix, and it chops it like a lawnmower does. As a conveyor belt. That would be so nice to have.
I'm just thinking of adding the robot to that and let it just go out there and harvest for you is because it was somebody who asked me, well, Bob, how are you going to do gardening and technology? And I'm like, do you know who the #1 AI company is in America right now? It's John Deere, because their tractors are so advanced nowadays of detecting soil levels and moisture and all these things. And I know that that's not something that's in a garden type setting, because those are $750,000 vehicles out there. What kind of stuff are you guys using though? Different, I mean, hand tools like you said, no, anybody can get those. Everybody can be using those. Clayton, are you using the same kind of basic materials that everybody could just go buy at their big box store? Or is there something specialized that you graduate up to when you're doing full-scale landscaping service?
I'll agree with Noah. I'm using a lot of hand tools. Hand tools are, it's the standard for gardening. They haven't really come up with a gardener robot yet. So we're still using the wheelbarrows. We're still using the shovels. And it really is, when you're a gardener and you're going to be good at this profession, or just a good gardener in general, it's all about hands-on. And you're going to have to see exactly what the soil is, and you're going to see how the plants are, and you're going to start noticing these different things. And that's why some people, just like Noah, are good at what they do, because they're observant and they see exactly what's going on. And you can replicate things based on years past, failures and successes. But it all comes down to simple garden tools. There's really no big tool that's going to help you with success in gardening. Mostly just your eyes.
What I'm hearing both of you say without saying it is, I need to keep a diary. I have to know exactly what I planted, when, where, how it did last year, how much da. Okay, then I got this thing. It does sound a lot more different, a little bit different than I had envisioned at the very beginning too, of thinking about what are you going to do for gardening, because it's a little bit more chemistry and it's a little bit more of everything for and everybody. And like you said, Clayton, you guys both can do this. Anyone can do this at home. But then you've both built full careers out of this.
It's not something for everybody, as far as the career is concerned, but as far as gardening, I think it is for everybody. It's something that you should at least do once in your life. If you've got a plot of land or you've got a backyard, it's there for you to enjoy. You don't have to grow just grass. You don't have to go buy the lawnmower and just mow your lawn every weekend. You can have some variety, be creative, do something else, watch a few gardening programs, get inspired, get some books, see what
There's a whole YouTube culture.
It's amazing, and with the internet and YouTube now, I wouldn't recommend everything on YouTube, because a lot of it is a little bit of a BS, but you got to just go for it. And what works, and what doesn't work. And you try the next thing. And if it works out, then you're going to be a successful gardener.
Take us out there, Noah.
I recommend a book, actually. There's a book called The One Straw Revolution. That's a really short read.
One Straw Revolution?
Yeah, One Straw Revolution. It chronicles a man and his journey to learning how to grow his own food. And it's very short. You could read it in a couple hours. And I just recommend that book to people, to anyone to read, to kind of understand what we're doing here, what farming's about, and how it's something that's trial and error. And nature is the greatest teacher, I always say. You can learn. Nature will teach you everything. If you plant something in the ground and it dies, well, nature told you that won't grow there. So let's try something else until something you plant in the ground and grows amazing. You're like, okay, I'm starting to learn. Just being observant. So there are lots of videos and books that you can read, but I always say experience is the best way to learn. Just try it. Just don't be afraid. Don't say that you don't have a green thumb. Just try it. Or you could talk to either one of me and Clayton, and we have experience. Yeah. We can help you out. Get you on your merry.
And to that point, thank you very much there, Noah. Both of these good gentlemen gave us their sites to put into the show notes here for you, so you can go follow up and go in directly to them. If you're in South Florida, Noah's farming community here, he's taking in for the new season. It has been great. I want to thank you guys both very much for being here with us today. Clayton and Noah, we already went through a whole hour. It's just so much fun. Let me throw up our final slide here. If there is anything you have to follow up with our guests today, creationstation@broward.org comes right to me, or take a look in the show notes. We'll see everybody next month. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.